Hello and welcome to our third Catching Up With, where we'll be chatting to the people who played a part in Watford's history, whether on or off the pitch. My name's John and with me is Lana Burney.
Hello, John.
And in this podcast we're catching up with former Watford manager Aidy Boothroyd. Now, you've spoken to a fair few managers. In fact, you spent a long time speaking to one manager in particular, didn't you, Lionel? Graham Taylor. How are managers different from chatting to players, do you think?
They have the sort of ultimate version of events because they're the ones making the decision. So when a player complains that, I got left out of this game because of blah, 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 well, the manager knows why, deep down, why that decision was made. And on the flip side of that, they carry the can. When the results go badly, they're responsible and they pay for it often with their jobs. So no manager sets out to be a failure, do they? But most football managers fail. I mean, that's the statistics bear that out. Aidy Boothroyd had some tremendous highs for a year and a half, really. He could do no wrong. And then we could debate, did the Premier League catch him out? Then how did it unravel as spectacularly as it did? I mean, I say spectacularly, it was more of a slow motion unravel, wasn't it? You know, you could see what was happening, it carried on happening, and he seemed at a loss to stop it happening. Yeah. And in the end, when they sacked him, it was probably slightly overdue.
Especially after that Hull game. I mean, that was the point where, like, in every other club, in every other situation, and every other manager, that last playoff loss, and especially the run that had led up to it. Yes, we're in the playoffs, but what happened before it would have guaranteed a change of manager over the summer, but it didn't.
No. What was so extraordinary about that was that he stuck to his principles on this increasingly turgid style of play, and then suddenly thought, once we went in the playoffs against Hull, well, you know what, we'll just go for it now. I mean, that was pretty unfair on the players, I felt at the time. It obviously didn't work. Hull were a decent side. I think that gets overlooked. What Boothroyd achieved in the first full season, when he had won promotion with a team that was not attractive to watch. It was real basic football. It was, you know, people talk about Graham Taylor's football being almost football by numbers, and you could make that case one way or the other. Boothroyd boiled that down until it was a thick paste, really. But it was successful. He won football matches, and I think when he got into the Premier League, I think he thought he was going to carry on, and that he was starting to believe perhaps some of the self-generated hype. But I also do have sympathy because he was trying. He's the closest, really, anyone has come to kind of living up to the Graham Taylor era, to take Watford from where they were. And you know, we can talk about the unceremonious way that Ray Lewington was eased out, but remember that day when he was unveiled as the manager, Aidy Boothroyd. Well, he's been running the community, you know, football in the community thing at Norwich or Leeds or whatever it was he'd been doing. What is going on? Survived by the skin of their teeth, and then to fashion a team and take them to promotion. I always remember something Gavin Marn told me when they reported back for pre-season before that promotion season. Boothroyd had set out all the chairs in the meeting room, basically like bus seats, so two this side with an aisle down the middle and two on the other side, and there was one seat at the front for the driver. And the players all came into the room and were like, what's going on here? Boothroyd sat down in the seat at the front as a driver and said, OK lads, I'm driving this bus to the Premier League. Who wants to get on?
Really?
And the players, you know, reluctantly, I think, sort of eventually kind of sat down and thought, this guy's a bit crazy. We've only just stayed up. And then they won promotion. And I think that says something about Boothroyd's absolute drive and determination. And I think that the fact that he couldn't then reproduce that, or continue that rather, in the Premier League, where the level was so much higher, I suspect is still coming to terms with that in some way.
Well, I went to St George's Park, home of English football, where he is currently working as the coach of the England under-21s. I had about half an hour with him in one of the offices to find out about his time at Watford and just, you know, those events that Lionel's talked about, how he feels about them now, looking back almost 10 years since he left the club. Aidy, we're here at St George's Park. It's quite quiet today. Is that normal for you? Is it normal for this place?
Well, I'm not quiet. No, I don't think I've ever been quiet. It is towards the end of the week. I think a lot of the staff come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and generally work from home on a Friday. But in our job, it's slightly different because we're at clubs a lot. So part of the time is spent here. Part of our time is spent watching games, and part of our time is doing club visits, checking on the players, speaking to coaches, managers, just to see how everybody's doing.
Travel quite a lot then?
Yeah, quite a bit. I was at the game on Saturday, I've lost track of the days, against Burnley, mainly because I wanted to have a little look at Sean's team and see how Will was doing. So yeah, I get around quite a bit, see loads of different games. I was at Champions League, Liverpool, Man City, seen both legs of that. So I'm very fortunate that I get to see the players play at all different levels. Champions League down to League One. I went to the Checker Trade Trophy to watch young Dean Henderson play for Shrewsbury. So really, I get the miles in and go and see as many players as I can.
Seemed like a bit of an ex-Watford managers reunion on Saturday, because you were there and Dyche was there Sean was there in the dugout, and Malky was there as well.
Right.
Yeah, what do I think we're on at this point after the Burnley game, we're in a bit of a happier place than where we were. What did you sort of make of Watford?
Well, it's a very different club. I took my wife with me, so she's not been back since I left, and it is a very different club to the one that I left. But you can still sense the family atmosphere around the stands, the way that the supporters are. Never get too angry when you're not doing well, and never get too excited when you're doing great. So it was terrific. Really good to go back. I really enjoyed it, and the important thing is it gives you. I had so many happy memories there. The fact that Malky was there with his son, I saw Sean. We had Mark Warburton come through that group, so a lot of the staff went on to bigger and better things. And for me, that's pretty much part of what my job was there, and still is here now. Really, is that it's not just the players that need to develop; it's the staff as well. And it was an environment where everybody could have a say and everybody could grow. And I think that was one of the key reasons that made us successful.
Yeah, because can I take you back to like the beginning almost?
Yeah.
Because we remember as Watford fans, you were an assistant manager at Leeds. We just lost Ray Lewington, who was such a father figure. The team was probably in a terrible place. They'd taken a pay cut, being close to administration, the sort of the thing around it. So how does a young man, as you were then, go into a changing room and say, we're going to go to the Premier League and get them all on side as quickly as it seemed that you did?
Well, I think, first of all, if I said to you that I was... there was a little bit of bravado there. There's no doubt about that, because I believed I could manage a football club, and I wanted to push myself and to be able to do it. I'd been for lots of interviews at lots of different clubs, Wickham, Oxford. I didn't even get an interview for whilst I was at Leeds. And to get the opportunity that I did, I think speaks volumes for the chairman at the time, Graham Simpson, and Mark Ashton, that gave me the opportunity to do that, and the Russo brothers. So first of all, I was lucky, and you always need a bit of luck to be a manager and to get results and to do well, and I certainly had a lot of that along the way. But in terms of the dressing room, I realised very quickly, ironically, Sean Dyche, who was a fantastic leader, but his legs didn't match his leadership qualities anymore, unfortunately. And it's strange how he left. I released him, and then he came back in, talked his way back into the club as a youth team coach, and obviously has done brilliant since, and did do then. But to go in there, we had to survive first and foremost, to stay in the league. And then it was about making sure that that I had a great opportunity, good timing really, because I had the ability to have an observational period where we managed to stay up, but also have a little look around at what I wanted to keep, what I didn't want to keep, and what needed to be adjusted really, and what needed to be enhanced and grown a bit. So I think that 3 months, that period, gave me a great opportunity to have a really good look at it.
Because I sort of see that side, the one that got promoted, very much as your side. There was 3 bits to it. There was the Watford youth boys, so there was Lloyd, and there was and Youngie especially. Then there were the guys who'd been there previously, so Jay Demerit and also Gavin Marn. And then there were almost, maybe you didn't necessarily bring in Marlon King, but him and Henderson were almost like the making of that team in terms of up front and making it so successful. And you sort of brought all those three things together. Particularly with, I mean, Marlon's always been this character for us who, you know, we absolutely adored because he scored lots of goals, and ever since he's sort of been that character we've sort of not want to distance ourselves from, but he's had all that before. Was that a big part of the fact that you were so young and bringing through and developing a team was almost like a chance for someone like him and even the young Watford players and a person like Jay Demerit, that it was almost like they were coming with you, and that was the feeling that club had, the team had?
Yeah, it did. I mean, we had good characters, and I think you're right. I think we all grew together as a group. But I think, you know, there were the fact that we'd all been given an opportunity. So in Ashley's case, he'd been signed. Ray signed him and gave him an opportunity. But before that, as a 16-year-old, he was touch and go. Lloyd Doyley, you know, he's Marmite for some supporters. I absolutely loved him. Because of what he could do. I never looked at what he couldn't do. I always looked at what he could do. And he's was a brilliant servant and scored his one goal, I think, which is even better. Never thought he'd do that. And then bringing the likes of, you know, I mean, Jay Demerit is another one who got an opportunity. You know, he's the Rocky Balboa of English football then. A guy that had just sort of backpacked around. What a great story he's got. Backpacked around, managed to get himself a trial, got himself an opportunity. And I can remember saying to Jay, I'd like you to talk more, I'd like you to be more of a leader and influential. And he said to me, boss, I don't really know the game, so I best keep quiet and just do my own thing. And that was him. But he had Malky alongside him that, you know, couldn't run, but he get everybody else to do his running and organise other people, a real leader. And obviously Ben Foster, another one, he's similar, who needed an opportunity. He was a chef at 15. And at 21 years old, he's playing in the Championship, then the Premier League, then got a move to Man United. So we had all those guys growing, and I think Gavin got his second wind really as a player. I think he certainly grew as a captain. And if you think about him down the spine of the team, obviously started with Alex Chamberlain, then Ben, who Alex mentored through his period at Watford. Malky Mackay with a young one alongside him, Gavin Malm with a young one alongside him in Matthew Spring, that was our goal scoring midfield player. And then you look at the top of the pitch, Marlon, who was probably a really good time in his career, in that he was Watford was last chance saloon for him really, because he'd had his troubles, he'd managed to come out of them, but I think we responded well together, me and him, because I didn't take any prisoners, and I was very clear about what I wanted him to do and what I expected of him, what I didn't expect of him. But he was absolutely brilliant for me. So, you know, you said about distancing yourself from people and players. I could never do that, because loyalty for me was like a two-way street. And I know he messed up on a couple of occasions, but I have to say he was absolutely brilliant for us. Absolutely brilliant. And the fact that he got his 23 goals and then moved on to you know, obviously bigger clubs, and had a good career. And then I took him again at Coventry. You know, he was a terrific player. And sometimes I think you need somebody with you that can push you. And I felt I was forever on top of him. But he rewarded all of us with what he did. And then Darius, who was a brawler, who was the only player I've ever had that said he wanted to be a cage fighter when he finished playing, which doesn't surprise me at all now. But, you know, again, a great lad who had not fulfilled his potential and went on to have a really good career. And then you look at the wide areas of the pitch, Paul Devlin, Chris Eagles after, Ashley Young, you know, and we couldn't leave Ashley out, even though he wasn't playing particularly well, because we didn't have anybody else. And that taught me a lesson about players and about giving people an opportunity and sticking with them, even though they're having a bad spell. They're just going on to bigger and better things. But I think overall the key thing is development, is that I was developing. I insisted that the staff developed and we pushed them, and the same with the players. It wasn't a case of just coming in and walking out with your toilet bag at the end of training. Everybody was expected to be better and to tell other people what was required. And I think because we had that, we went and we obviously got promoted, but we beat much better we were a better team than most of the teams in that league. I would say the majority had better players than we did.
And we had no expectations whatsoever. I don't think of their dreams, not necessarily expectations of staying in the Premier League. Looking back now on it, what were your realistic expectations of that Premier League season when you were after got promoted?
Well, I think I was quite brash and said 17th isn't good enough. A little bit older and wiser, 17th would have been absolutely fine. But I think what I tried to do was try to improve so many different bits of the club. So the academy, the infrastructure of what we did, with the chairman and Mark. Tried to improve the training ground, trying to improve sports science. We tried the 1%, when really we should have been looking at 20 and 30% by buying better players, or putting more money into probably 3 or 4 players.
But wasn't that be almost a hindrance at that point? Because why Watford being so successful going up now, because of the Potso network, being able to pull on the resources they've got. We were little old Watford at that point still, to the outside world. Did you not feel that actually, and then especially with Marlon's injury, that actually you couldn't create the team that you wanted without spending a ridiculous amount of money, which would have absolutely crippled the club almost instantly if it had gone wrong?
Yeah, I mean, when I look back on it, it was difficult to attract players. It was like, well, see where you are at Christmas, and it was like, well, I'd rather you joined us now, to be honest. But we couldn't pay them enough to we'd gone from a 4.8 million turnover to a £50 million turnover, and it's a huge difference. And what happens when you get that sort of money is you think, oh, it'll be fine, but actually you just get different problems. We ended up getting a lot of similar players rather than focusing on getting those, like you say. I mean, you're not going to find another 23-goal centre forward, and I'm convinced if you'd have stayed with us and been able to to keep fit, then we would have had a much better chance than what we did. We finished on 31 points, which wasn't enough, but we got the points we got on pure grit and determination. And when you keep getting knocked back and getting beat, it takes a bit out of you as a group. But we persevered and persisted and kept going. But in the end, we just didn't have enough. And what happens then, when you're successful, is everybody sort of vultures look at your players, your best players, and off they go. So Ashley goes off to Villa for 15 million. Marlon and Hammer leave for about 4 million quid each. And then it's like, okay, what am I going to get into to improve that? And you've either got to have an awful lot of money to replace, or you've got to be really cute in what you did. And probably looking back, our recruitment wasn't as good as what it could have been.
The two sort of players, that recruitment wise, one is Nathan Ellington, because everyone sort of gets bogged down with the price tag, but that's even now, like we spent 18 million on Andre Gray this year, and you go, it's not 18 million, it's football 18 million, and that's really different. Yeah. And even then, I think that the money we had to pay West Bromwich for it. Did you sort of see him though? I sort of saw him as I had friends who were Baggies fans, and they weren't massive fans of his, but almost he had done something good. Did you feel like you could get more from him?
Yeah. That's it in a nutshell, is that I thought I could. I looked at what we had around us, I looked at the environment, and I thought this kid needs that again. So at Wigan, he was at Bristol Rovers as a young player, he was phenomenal, great goal scoring record. Went to Wigan, played up front and was outstanding. Really good connector of the midfield to the front. And the back to the midfield as well. He would be a really good link for us. That was what was in my mind. Went to West Brom, for a big price tag. Didn't do it, but I felt that I could get him going again. So that was the point. Looking at what he could do, where he'd been, but it didn't work out. And sometimes it doesn't work out. It completely different to Marlon. Nathan, shy. Didn't say an awful lot. Not as confident as you would expect him to be for what he was. But when you're searching around at what you can get, do you go into Europe and get somebody that you don't know, that's got the family's got to settle, the wife's got to settle and everything else, or do you go with somebody that has been tried and trusted, and you think, I can get him going again? In the end, I couldn't, and he couldn't get himself going again. But at that time, 3.2 million, it was a lot of money in the record transfer. So I'm glad that Andre Gray's gone and a few others, and I'm sure that it'll come good. But for us, he had to hit the ground running. He didn't get any. Nathan didn't get any opportunities. He was in there. He was a record signing, and he had to score, and he didn't, unfortunately.
Did you ever think we've got a WhatsApp group for the boys who do our podcast, and one of them said, "I wonder what do you think Nathan would have done better if you'd signed him during that promotion season?"
Yeah, I think he would. We had momentum then, and the Championship's completely different to the Premier League, as you well know. You've experienced it now as a club again. But I think you have to make decisions. I made a decision. I thought it was a good one, and he didn't score as many goals as what I would have hoped him to. But that's what it is. That's football, isn't it? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And because of the added pressure and moving clubs and the expectation, in the end, it didn't work out. Having said that, would he have been a bigger success if we'd have kept Ashley Young and we'd have got Adam Johnson earlier? I'm sure he would, because you couldn't not score goals with those two.
It was that thing that after going down, that if you look at I went onto Wikipedia, sort of just looking at the list, and they colour it, the results. It's green if it's a win, red if it's a loss, and a yellow. And that season is literally blocks that. It's like green, then a bit of a mixture, then draw, then red. It was such a contrast that season from beginning to end. Was that a big surprise? Did that come out of nowhere?
No, I think, again, older and wiser, 10 years on, you look back at it and you think, well, a great start. I knew at some point there was going to be a lull. I think everybody points to the game against West Brom where we got a real good idea of 3-0, but it was, they were miles better than us on the day. That gave them momentum. Tony's Stoke were 1-1, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. They just gradually got themselves up the table, and he did it with a lot of different loan players. We had the core. I felt that we were a strong enough team to do well. We had Danny Shitu, we got Lee Bromby in. The goalkeeper changed, of course, because Ben went back to United. But we'd lost Marlon, he'd gone. Adam was a big part of that good start, I have to say, because he was a very talented player. But then over a period of time, I think also I tried to change the style. I got bogged down with listening to too many people about they're an ugly team, they're this, they're that, the other. A bit like Sean Dyche at Burnley. And when you look at Burnley, well, certainly now, they're not a long ball team. They can play in different ways. I mean, Watford found that out Saturday. And that is, I think, the art of a good coach. But when you're trying to please all the people and you want to be the blue-eyed coach, that boy that plays and pleases everybody, it ain't going to work. So stick to your guns. I didn't do that. I think we're in a period of change. We had a team that couldn't play the way that I wanted them to play towards the end, and in the end, even though I do think. There was a little bit of luck involved and needed. I think in that first playoff game against Hull, when Danny Shitu scored from the corner and Kevin Friend for some reason didn't said it wasn't a goal. Still don't know why. If that goes in, it's a different game, because we were then in the ascendancy. We surprised them with how we played, and even going up to Hull, we were 2-0 down, but we scored first. Richard made a mistake. Just before half time, we're going 1-1, and then we've got to chase then. And then what happens is it becomes a basketball match, and they were better at putting the ball in the hoop than what we were. That's for sure. That night. So you go from having nothing, overachieving, living the dream for a season, and I have to say, when I look back now, how much I learned in that year about me as a person and about me as a coach, massive. Similar to the last few years I've had here, really, in working for England, in terms of your own personal growth and your own professional growth. Huge. To then going from being the hunter to be the hunted, which always gets talked about this time of year. And we didn't have the experience within the camp in terms of the players to be able to do it again when we were one of the favourites to go up. And then the night at Hull City, driving home on the bus from that game, was like, right, well, where do we go now? We've got to really start and rebuild again. So it was a meteoric rise, a quick fall, and then it was about trying to get back up again.
Because we sort of look at it again. The turning point for me, you mentioned that 3-0 at home to West Brom. That sort of game does stick out in that season. Also, 3-0 away win at Coventry sticks out my head as well, which was, that was the high point at the beginning of the season. And Gavin Mann left at Christmas, and that was almost like the things that about there saying you sort of said that you would at that point things were okay, and you were already thinking about the next year and the Premier League possibly again. That really changed, and the contrast at the end of the season. My friend Mike, who did the podcast with, he didn't go to the playoff home leg because he'd just gone from, just wasn't in the pit of it all. But you also, that's for us as fans. But you seem to have really got it in the, quite a quick and really aggressive turn of a tide from the press, particularly the local press, really sort of went from one way to another quite quickly. That must have been that must have been a huge learning experience. It was. Even more so now. The media is so influential, and I went from a stage of reading everything because it was nice. And look at this! Come on, look at this, Emma. Look what they're writing about me now. I'm going to be the next England manager, and that's nice, isn't it? To when it turned, and I see it now. I see it now in some younger managers as well. That they'll take the positives, but they won't accept the negatives. It's like, well, it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. And I got a little bit like that for sure. And I started to think more about what the Watford Observer were thinking and how they can affect the fans, and it became a bit of a spin culture, really. When really we should have just all been honest and gone, right, okay, things aren't going great, but here's what we need to do. And get back to basics, what got us promoted in the first place. So that is obviously, you can't regret anything, but it's certainly a massive learning for me. And when I see the way that Gareth deals with the media, he is a whole new level. And I've said to him, I wish I could be more like you. I wish I could do that. And probably I can do now a bit better than what I did. But at the time, I think there was a turn, and I didn't deal with it very well. You got so much so quickly. Let's say success, and then the reverse. You've talked a lot about it's 10 years almost since you were at the club, over 10 years since you were at the club. What is it the main thing you take from that time at Watford that you sort of look back on fondly, but also look back on that were important for you and forming where you are now, which is the manager of the England under 21, which is a big role.
Yeah, it is. It's a massive role. I'm very honoured to be doing it, and it's ironic that when we started, we were working at developing individuals and developing as a team, and that's what this is really. This job is developing a team to win, but developing individuals to go and play for the national team, for the seniors, and it's a great role for me because that's what I'm all about. That's what my biggest strength is. If anything, would be that. So when I look back at Watford, I think about the relationships and the trust that people had in me, to be given an opportunity first and foremost by Graham Simpson and the board at that particular time, and the chief exec. So I'm always very grateful for that. That didn't end particularly well, but it started brilliantly. And the team grew and started to believe, and we were going to win games. We were going to get promoted. Nothing was going to stop us. And I got to a point where I realised that unless we have serious injuries, then we're going to do this. Because everybody was looking over the shoulder at us, thinking, when are they going to blow up? And we never did. We just kept going. And the way that we finished the playoff final, it was a boxing match. It would have been stopped. It was just so one-sided. And you just don't get that. Really, you just don't get it. And then I've been on the other side of it as well. As a manager, but that particular time, I thought we were an unstoppable force. We had so much momentum. Everybody knew everybody else's strengths. We knew what we were. And then I think we had complete clarity on what we were and what we were doing. The next year was a wake-up call. And the year after that, I think, I tried to change things too quickly. I think although John Eustace and Gavin Mann were very similar players, they were similar players. I think Damien Francis and Matthew Spring, there wasn't a lot between us, but I spent £8 million on one. Sorry, not £8 million. I can't remember what I spelled. 1.5 for Damien, that's right. And Matthew Spring probably could have done the same job. But I got obsessed with trying to make us better quicker when really I should have taken a little bit more time. And now I would have a better idea. But then it was like a Meccano set. Well, that's not working, so I need to put this new part on. But that comes from experience. That comes from time. And it's ironic that my time at Watford has really defined a lot of what I do and who I am. But it's also taught me a lot of lessons, a lot of life lessons. When I look back now, I think I'm so much better as a coach than I've ever been. But at that particular time, because it was new and fresh, and who's this new bloke? I started to believe my own press a little bit. So I'm a lot more rounded now, than still aggressive and still want to be very successful, but a lot more rounded and a lot more sensible and a lot better manager and coach than I ever have been, really.
Seeing the role of England under 21, the development aspect that is so big for you. Do you ever see yourself going back into club football?
Yes, I do, and every time I say that, my wife winces. Because it's one of those things that I think managers, we've all got a screw loose somewhere that we want to get back into, where we're going to be vilified, we're going to be a king or we're going to be a clown, and we want to chase that dream of being successful, and the buzz that you get from building a team that goes on to win and be successful is huge. But then the downsides of it are horrendous, very, very lonely at times. But I have to say, coming and working for England has reinvigorated me as a person, as a coach. I got my enthusiasm back, got my fire back, and I love what I do. And I'm not in any rush at all to leave this place. I think it's a great place for me to be. I think I add something to it, the fact that I've been beaten up a little bit by the game, and I think there's a bit of real life attached to what we do now here. And I get to work with the national team manager, share an office with him. I'm in a really good place, so I'm not in a rush to go back in, but I'm sure at some point my time will be up here and it'll be time to look at getting another Watford promoted.
So John, what did you make of Aidy Boothroyd 10 years on?
He was in a happy place. You can hear that across the interview, and you can hear it by how he talked about Watford. I think since he has been at Watford, he went to Northampton and Coventry and Colchester, where he didn't have his shining moment, let's say, like he did another Watford, which is I suspect what he was sort of trying to find. He'd shine at Watford, the failure, if you want to call it, at Watford, certainly would have given him a different sort of drive. And it didn't really come with him. And I think now where he is with England under 21s, where he is probably more in his happy place, where he is that motivator of a developing side and young people and young players, where he talked about where that makes him happier professionally. But the bit that sort of right at the end you heard there, the bit where he would want to go back into clubs, and he does want to do another Watford. That is still there, but that sort of looking back on how he did it in the past, I don't think he'd quite do it, fake bus or not, if he went to another club. So I definitely came back like almost forgetting. Sometimes you can, when a manager leaves, you get caught up with the end and what happened. Like when we look back at Slav, it's absolutely 100% lovely and rosy, and we love him because he left when we were just promoted. And I don't think I'm quite ready to look back on that and figure out exactly, truly look at where he was. And most managers, though, leave on a negative. And he did leave on a massive, massive negative because, as we said before, the unravelling took a long, long time. It was a big, ball of wool to unravel. So it was lovely sort of seeing him bright and happy and thriving professionally. And also, what's he going to do next?
I think that's a very good point about managers. 9 out of 10 of them leave on a bum note, don't they? And the ones that don't are almost, it's almost like they've been frozen in time. Yeah. And particularly Djukanovic has gone to Fulham and been successful there. So the logical extension of that is, he could have been the man to, we wouldn't have had to have Marco Silva if he'd stuck around. But that's the thing, isn't it? Most managers end up getting the sack, and then it's about rehabilitating their careers almost and rebuilding their confidence. And I mean, just imagine how much of a dent Boothroyd's ego, and I don't use that as a pejorative term. He clearly has an ego. All people in sport and many people in life do. But there was a period, wasn't there, when certainly the early days in the Premier League, I can just picture him on the touchline. He had the earpiece and microphone, and and there was a sense that he was fresh, cutting edge. He was doing things that other people weren't doing. Now, I don't know whether that's necessarily true or not, because he very quickly began to look like the last of the old school managers, particularly with the style of play and the inability to really break out of the trap of, sign some more players, sign some expensive players. That's not worked. Ellington, for example, sign some more players. I remember that transfer window, the season trying to get back up, and goodness, the names still bring me out in shivers. Bromby and Matt Sadler and Cabba and Williamson, who was decent, Williamson, and Hoskins, who wasn't. And just, oh my word, it was like sort of throwing jelly at a wall and seeing what would work. All managers have, they have that in them. Even successful managers have periods where they're running out of ideas.
It would be interesting to see what he's like as a club manager again in the future after what he's done. And in many ways, you look at him, you think if the Pozzos were going to hire an English manager, a manager who works closely with the young players, the cheap young players, has a vast and wide knowledge of the young players. I'm only joking.
I need to stop you there, John. I need to stop you there.
Thank you again for listening and subscribing to these podcasts and From the Rooker End. Do tell your friends, and if there is anybody you'd like us to catch up with in future podcasts, don't think of the obvious. Is there one just isn't coming to our mind but is always on your mind? Then do email us podcast@fromtherookerend.com. Thank you, Lionel.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening.